family-owned shop in Loganville, Soesby's Garage for all your automotive repair needs. We service all makes and models, foreign and domestic. We repair engines, alternators, brakes, alignments, AC systems, and more, using certified technicians with over 90 years of combined experience. We also offer same-day service for some repairs. Soesby's Garage, 200 Bay Creek Road in Loganville. Dependable, honest, and fair. Look us up on Google or Facebook. We'll take good care of you.
Broadcasting live from the Subaru of Gwinnett studio inside the Sonesta Gwinnett Place Atlanta Hotel. It's time for Case in Point, presented by Paradigm Security Services. We are the cornerstone of security in the Southeast.
Hey everybody, I'm your host, Rick Strawn, President of Paradigm Security Services, and welcome to Case in Point, presented by Paradigm Security Services. If you would, for everybody, please hit that subscribe button on whatever format and podcast format you're using. And we are excited to be with you today on Business RadioX. We're coming to you from the Subaru of Gwinnett studio, located in the beautiful Sonesta Gwinnett Place Atlanta Hotel in Duluth, Georgia. Each week we plan to feature businesses in the Atlanta area, especially those that serve Gwinnett County, as well as people that serve our wonderful county. While all businesses have security concerns, not all are about physical security, and we will touch on that and all related aspects of security through the course of each show. Our guest today, I'm very happy to have the Chief of Gwinnett County Police Department, Chief Brett West. Glad to have you here, Chief.
Great to be here.
You know, there's so much going on in today's world revolving around police and the Blue Crew that this is a perfect time really to have you on to talk about some of this. Before I start out talking about issues and stuff, I always like the people that are listening to kind of hear a little bit about the person that they're listening to. So who is Brett West?
I'm somebody that grew up here in Gwinnett County. I went to school all my life here in Gwinnett County, graduated from South Gwinnett High School. So we moved to here in 1970. So I've been around Gwinnett County for many, many years and seen the change and evolution that this county has gone through. I'm a graduate of South Gwinnett High School, as I said before, a graduate of Mercer University for my undergraduate degree.
Good school.
And I have a master's degree from Columbus State University in public administration. I've also a graduate of the Georgia Law Enforcement Command College as well as the FBI National Academy. I've been with the Gwinnett County Police Department for just over 29 years. It's been a long career. My dad retired from the Gwinnett County Police Department, so it's also in the family. So, when I first started, did I ever think I'd be the chief of police? No, I did not. That was never, something that I had aspired to be. Then it's just been an evolution. Again, I've been with the agency since 1991, and it has grown tremendously since then, and still growing. So the opportunities that I've experienced are still there for the folks that are coming in now. So that's a little bit about me.
Well, it's nice to have. That's one thing I love about Gwinnett County is we talked earlier is they basically groom people to be able to fill in these positions. When someone retires, they're constantly training and developing people to fill in these major slots, and it's something that they do coming up through the police department, which is an awesome way. You don't go out searching for somebody to fill these slots. You've got people that have been developed and are ready to step right in and do it, and that's something that's exceptional about our county. Well, Gwinnett County Police Department. Now, I know they have requirements for the reporting, the use of force. Can you kind of tell us how that works with Gwinnett County?
Absolutely. Well, one thing is we're an accredited agency, so before actually going into the policy aspect of it, it's good to know where we get our policies from, our best practices from, and why we do what we do. Again, we're a nationally accredited agency through the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. And again, this was established back in the late 80s the early 80s when the first agencies became accredited. In 1977, the U.S. Department of Justice provided a grant to the leading law enforcement executive associations to actually design a conceptual accreditation model. And it seemed, again, I said in 1977, those are things that you're hearing to be called for today.
Yep.
National standards, best practices, they exist already, through the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. And those executive associations that were instrumental in developing this program are, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, the National Sheriff's Association, and the Police Executive Research Forum. So all of these organizations and associations combine, and they work together to develop those best practices, and have been doing this since that time.
And they've been an ongoing process where they keep improving on them.
Absolutely. It's always been an evolving process. I mean, when you're talking about best practices need to be evolving because society evolves, technology evolves, information and education evolves. Things that are available to you today and information that's available to you today, is different than what wasn't there, and it's going to be different in years to come. So it needs to always be an evolving process. Again, we became accredited in 1993, so we've been nationally accredited for 27 years now.
I know I was with the city of Atlanta for a lot of years, and I remember when they went through the accreditation process. It's a very long, very tedious, there's a lot of boxes to check off that you have to develop, and there was a lot of stuff that had to be done with Atlanta to reach that accreditation process. It's a big deal.
Absolutely, and it's something that's not easy to attain.
That's correct.
Nor is it easy to maintain. Again, there's over 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the United States, and about 4% are nationally accredited.
Yeah, I was just going to say, not everybody has been reached through and done the accreditation process and completed it.
No, it's not, because it's a very stringent process, and it's put forward so that you have the best practices in law enforcement. So, and that's beneficial for our community. You have some way to objectively say that the policies and procedures we have in place are the best practices in law enforcement. Not only do we say it, you have outside assessors that come in every so often for review and audits to confirm that your policies are correct, but going beyond the policy, making sure that your practices and that you're following those policies.
Yeah, the procedures, having policies and all is great to have, but they call them policies and procedures for a reason, and in that order for a reason. You've got to put the policies in place, but more importantly, you've got to inspect what you expect, and you've got to actually have the procedures that follow those policies and see that they're adhered to.
Absolutely, as well as the training. So you have to have the policies and then the training on those policies, and again, like you say, the processes in place to make sure that it's being monitored and it's being done. So going back to the original question about use of force reporting, in 2019, when you just to kind of put use of force in perspective,
it has changed.
It has changed, but just looking at just understanding how often we actually use force. It's not as often as folks think. In 2019 alone, we responded to over 500,000 calls for service. That's over 500,000 calls for service. And of this, there was only 254 incidents where force was applied. So at over 500,000 calls for service where police interacted with the community in some way, only 254 times was force ever used.
Yeah, that's amazing. And people, the thing is that with the media and everything, that's what the people focus on. So it seems like it happens a lot more, and people, in a lot of ways, are convinced that it happens a lot more, when the reality is not the perception.
Right. So when you define force in the reporting of use of force, our policies require any application of force has to be reported in writing, and it has to be reviewed through a chain of command to ensure that proper policies were followed, procedures were followed, and that this was a lawful application of that force. Again, any degree of force, if there's any resistance at all, even if it's just having to grab someone's hand and pull it behind their back, that is an application of force.
Well, I'm glad to see that Gwinnett County does do the reporting on that, because like I say, it helps to put things in their proper perspective, and we don't hear about it enough.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important that people understand that it is, everything is reported, and it is a small, less than 1% type occasion.
It's even far less than 1%. Again, when you look at 254 applications of force, it comes out to about 0.048%, which is even less than a half a percent.
It's amazing. And again, perception's one thing, but sometimes the way, because of its way it's reported, or the as volatile as it may get, the perception is not in fact the reality of what's going on. And I think we need to be reporting much more on the reality than just individualizing this and hyping the individual things. It needs to be understood in its proper perspective. Well, I know that one of the important things that people are talking about now is body cams. And I know that we've started looking at getting body cameras even on our security personnel. What's the policy with Gwinnett as far as body cameras?
Well, Gwinnett County began looking at body cameras over 5-6 years ago. So this is not something new to Gwinnett County. The reality is the technology, body cam technology, is an expensive process. So it's not something you can just jump into when you're an agency this size overnight. It takes planning. It takes budget preparation. It takes all of those things to come into play. And we have gone through all that, and we are equipped. All of our patrol officers out in the field are equipped with body cameras, every single one of them. So it is our policy that you will have the body camera, and it has specific procedures of that it must be turned on when you're responding to calls and dealing with members of the public and things like that. There are some circumstances where they turn it off. Again, if they're dealing with certain types of crimes, or with juveniles or things like that.
Or sex crimes. Sometimes you don't want that necessarily on camera.
So there, but that initial response, that contact, it's going to be there. In times where there's applications of force,
it better be on.
It better be on.
A lot of people think that I know the original worry back in the day was, it's going to show stuff that it'll be hyped up and it'll be overblown, and it'll be more used against us. But I think the more today's society has developed, officers are realizing that it can be to your benefit to have those on as much, if not more, than it is a detriment.
Absolutely. We do consider it a benefit, and
Absolutely.
Most officers do consider it a benefit. However, it is not, it is not going to solve everything, because a camera is just a camera. It only captures what the camera is pointing towards.
Correct.
It doesn't always capture everything. Again, and it doesn't add. Sometimes it's not giving the complete picture, because again, things can be happening off in the peripheral. Things can be happening behind someone. Things can be happening off to the side of someone. So it doesn't capture every single thing. And the other thing to remember is, just because the camera captures it, it doesn't mean that the officer may or may not have seen it with his actual eyes.
That's true. Their eyes can be looking somewhere else while the camera's focused on just a given focus, given direction. In addition to the body cameras, do y'all use cameras for your vehicles as far as the patrols?
We do not. Right now, the only thing that we do have is the body cameras. There is one exception, and that's our DUI task force. Mm-hmm. Their cars are equipped with dash cams as well.
Well, I know that, and you talked about it for a little bit there. I know the object is not to have a camera. The object is to have a quality camera. And those are not cheap. I've invested in a couple of them, and to find the good cameras, they're expensive. But if you don't have good cameras, it's like having a bank that's got a camera up there. You really can't see anything. All they have is a camera in place. You really can't see what's going on. It's not focused. It's a terrible quality stuff. And I know that I've seen some of these cameras that y'all have in place, and they are good quality cameras.
They are good quality cameras, and yes, that's an expense just in the camera in and of itself. But the greater expense is
training,
storage.
Oh yeah.
Because of the retention requirements that we have for these things, we have to keep this video for a long period of time. That is what is a major ongoing annual cost, is that storage and retention of those videos.
Yeah, you can't have 30 days and out. on a camera on the footage, because this stuff may be used 10 years from now in court process.
Absolutely.
I know that it's very important to have these, but it's also important that the officers fully understand how they work, the usage. So therein lies the training issue, that you've got to make sure these people fully understand how to use them.
Correct.
And I know, your training process, the process y'all go through is a good process, that you keep them well up on any changes that come through. And that's done through your actual training in the initial process, correct?
That is correct. I mean, that's the way it's done now. The initial rollout, obviously, we had officers here before they went through our recruit training, so there was that orientation or that training, that initial training that we had to provide to everyone. But now they're trained and issued while they're in the academy. So when they leave the academy, they've already, had it on in the academy, learned how to use it during practical exercises. So it's not new to them as soon as they hit the streets out there.
Well, since we've brought up training, can you give a little insight about the extent of what these officers are put through, the length of time they're put through, and the type of training they go through with the city? I know they have the driver as well, operation of vehicle as well.
Absolutely. Well, the Georgia Peace Officer Standards and Training Council is who sets the training requirements for all police officers in the state of Georgia. All police officers have to attend a certified police academy in order to become certified to be a police officer.
And that's certified by what we call POST.
Yeah, Georgia POST, the Peace Officer Standards and Training. And so Georgia, there's only, I believe, 4 or 5 departmental training academies. Gwinnett Police being one, DeKalb Police, Atlanta Police, I believe
down in Forsyth,
Clayton and Cobb, and then Forsyth for the state.
Yep.
For the state. And then there's regional academies as well, and there's some at some of the technical schools. But as a departmental academy, we train our own officers. The state requires, there is a minimum requirement of 408 training hours, and it covers topics such as use of force, driving, constitutional law, traffic law, criminal procedure, de-escalation training, impartial policing, bias-based policing, those type of things. So all of those things, cultural diversity, community relations, all of those things are given there in a 408 hours. We have to meet that state requirement. But in addition to that state requirement, we train approximately 500 additional hours before our officers are released onto the road. So they get twice the amount of training that's required by the state. And it's only to better prepare them to face the demands that they have out there. We do a lot of that academic training, but in the second phase of our training, we do some advanced training, but we do a lot of practical training where we're putting it scenario-based training so that recruits have the ability to experience a lot of these things in a training environment before being exposed to it in the real world. So their chance of success goes up tremendously when they have that ability to fail in a training environment. And then, you can correct that without it being real world. So it better prepares that officer when they do hit the street. And then when they do hit the street, they're out there for another 10 weeks in field training. So we're looking at 9 to 10 months before they're ever released on their own.
And, it's important to understand that through the scenario training and all, where they have live scenarios that they actually go through, that each of these officers, it gives the ability to see how they interact, and if they interact the wrong way, because they're going to be, it's an instantaneous action that you have to take, just like on the street. So you're able to see how they react from the normal way their mind works. And by doing that and making these mistakes, people are able to see and give them guidance, give them instruction, make corrections, so that you change the way the thought process works. I know y'all have an extensive the firearms training and all. That is very extensive too. Really, it's more extensive than what the state requires on that end as well.
It is, but it's not just about firing the weapon.
Correct.
In any aspect of training that we do, we're always weaving in the communications piece, that de-escalation piece, that community relations piece. Even though that we're trained to do, and apply force when we have to, the goal is not to have to. The goal is talk it down, to de-escalate the situation to where force does not have to be applied.
Well, shoot, don't shoot training is paramount to a police department.
Absolutely.
You've got to know when not to shoot as well. And I know y'all have a shoot house that is just unbelievable, to where you actually get that second by second training of whether your mind wants to go to the pull the trigger or your mind wants to hold off on it, so that you there again have that opportunity to de-escalate rather than just go to shoot the gun.
Correct. And again, that's why we're so fortunate here at Gwinnett. The SPLOS program and stuff has provided us with tremendous training facility. Not only do we have the firing range itself, where you're teaching officers how to fire the weapon at a target.
Right.
We have our judgmental shooting simulators, to where it's not about shooting, it's about judging the situation, talking to people, and learning how to deal with the situation before making that decision to shoot or not shoot. But then again, we also have the live fire shoot house, where we're able to create the most realistic scenarios that we possibly can to put our trainees through, again, so that they're better prepared, so that they have some experience to draw from rather than just a classroom experience. And I really do think, and I think when you look at our use of force statistics compared to the number of calls that we go to every year, you can see that this is working for us.
Well, there again, it's the training on top of training on top of training. And that's a big issue that people say we need to have more training. And for a lot of departments,
and we agree with that.
Right, and for a lot of departments, it's extremely important. But I think every department, it's important, like you say, that the more you look at it, the more times that you're confronted with stuff, you realize that there's still more training that you need to do. And I know you do annual training where they're required to come back in for a certain period every year to go back through the policies, procedures, laws, and your firearms training and your shoot, don't shoot, de-escalate. All of that stuff is reiterated every year.
Every single year. The state has a requirement of 20 hours a year, and they have specific requirements as it relates to de-escalation, use of force training, and use of force being policy training, understanding what your policy is and understanding what the law is, in addition to demonstrating your proficiencies. But again, community relations, de-escalation training, those are all requirements that the state has. In addition to the state requirement, we have our own internal requirements of things that are important to us that you must have in-service training on at least annually.
Well, I can vouch for, I've seen a lot of the training that Gwinnett County does, and I've got an officer that lives next door to me that's just been through the last couple of years, the training and all, and it's amazing. You really put it up front as far as the importance of getting that training, and I wish every department focused like y'all do on training. They would have a much better survival rate out there, as far as not just survival of the officer, but survival of the people that are out there that you're dealing with and of the department itself.
Absolutely. And again, we are lucky. We do have the resources. Gwinnett County prides itself on making sure that our folks have the best opportunity to be successful. So we're very, very lucky in that sense that our Board of Commission supports this ideal as well. Without their support, we couldn't do these things. So, and what I mean that is there's a budgetary support, there's a budgetary piece to this. They also understand the importance of training because, again, it puts a better officer out there, a better prepared officer out there.
Yeah. Well, I know that there's been so much talk about chokeholds and stuff like that. What's y'all's policy on the chokeholds?
Well, chokeholds has been...
Or yoke holds, as we called them back in the day.
Yoke hold, lateral vascular neck restraints, and things like, and they're different than a chokehold.
Yes, they are.
A chokehold is something that actually cuts off the airway, where a vascular neck restraint cuts off the carotids. It's like the sleeper hold,
and it works like a champ. I can tell you.
But either one has been prohibited for our department for 25 plus years.
That's great,
and it's been in our policy. It's not just been a practice, but it's been a written policy statement that these tactics are prohibited.
And that makes it so that it's good that every officer coming in not only learns that it's prohibited, but they also have everybody that's behind them that's been in service for the last 25 years has already been schooled in that. So that helps to weed out, because I know way back in the day, the carotid hold was very, very, very much used. I know I've used it in the past many times, and the problem is too many people don't know how to appropriately do it, and so it's hard to train how to do it. So the best thing to do is to train not to do it.
Mm-hmm. And you're exactly right. If you do decide to have the lateral neck restraint, there's a lot of training that has to go on with that, a lot of demonstration of proficiency. And if you don't do it all the time, can you really be proficient at it?
Exactly.
And unless you're, an expert in martial arts or have had a lot of training in that tactic, it's a skill that, if not used very often,
you can hurt somebody.
You could hurt somebody
or kill somebody.
Right. So it's just been something that we've prohibited the entire time I've been with this police department.
Well, that's good news, and I think it's been well beneficial to the Gwinnett County Police Department, because we've had no issues in that area.
No, not in that area.
So, and that's good. Well, a lot of people see in the news where people are shooting at vehicles, and as they're coming at them, going away. Most of what you see on the news is the ones that are going away. You don't generally see the ones that are coming straight at the officer that they really afraid they're fixing to get run over. But what's y'all's policy on that?
Well, similar to the chokeholds, as far as shooting at or from a moving vehicle, again, this is something that's also been prohibited by our policy, unless that officer is in actual defense of his life, unless there's someone that's actually trying to use that car as a weapon to run them over. Otherwise, it's strictly prohibited.
Well, it's hard to shoot at something running at you and get out of the way at the same time.
Right, and it's difficult to shoot at something that's moving and your accuracy be good, because, again, you start putting other things in jeopardy. So it has to be a deadly force encounter in order for that to be justified. Otherwise, it better not happen.
Yeah, and that I totally agree. And a lot of people don't realize that, shooting at a vehicle, sometimes the angles do bounce and go other places that you don't intend them to be.
They do. Absolutely.
And a lot of people think, well, if it hits that window, it's automatically going through. Not necessarily.
No.
And a lot of people have been surprised about that. Well, I know that we talked a little bit about the de-escalation training, and that is something that has been more and more important. I know we have a 5-hour class in our academy, the last 5 hours before they graduate our academy that Paradigm has, that it's spent on the de-escalation. Strictly solid, just nonstop for, well, I guess it's 4 hours.
Right.
4-hour training on de-escalation. How do y'all incorporate the training and de-escalation? To what extent do y'all do it with Gwinnett?
Again, we have the academic portion of de-escalation training, defining what de-escalation is, explaining the different types of de-escalation techniques. I mean, there's so many things that you can do to de-escalate. One is just to have that calm presence on the scene, to try to be able to maintain that, trying to talk people down and get them to a place to where they're not so aggravated. But while situations are tense, there's other tactics as well, such as, not closing the distance, keeping a safe distance, keeping things between you, stalling for time till you can get other folks there. Those are all de-escalation tactics that can be, employed. Just because we employ them don't mean it's going to work.
Correct.
The receiver on the other end has to be responsive to it, and many times they are. Many times the situations are de-escalated.
We saw a recent thing on the news where that officer de-escalated that lady coming out with all those rifles and using a very forceful tone when he was getting her to do what he was doing, but at the same time, nobody got shot, nobody got hurt. That was awesome.
Right. But in addition to the formal training, like I said before, it's woven into our practical exercises. So when we teach our practical exercises and we're teaching conflict and conflict resolution, whether we're teaching traffic stops, pullovers, responding to family violence incidents, whatever we're doing, now you have to practice these techniques. So it gives them that opportunity to go beyond just learning about it. Now they have to apply what they've learned.
I know when I was on the street years ago, I used to tell people that the young officers coming out said, you can go out here and you can play Billy Badass all you want. And what you're going to find is that there's somebody out there that is a badder ass than you are. And you will find them if you go out there looking like that. And the best, I got in very few physical fights when I was in law enforcement, and because I found it the way you present yourself, the way you carry yourself, the way you talk. I used to tell them the idea is to convince the person on the other side that, well, this guy's awfully calm. He must know something that I don't want to find out. I said, so that way, it's one of those things where you talk the person down, and they voluntarily get in a car rather than having to get close to them, fight them, and drag them into a car, because that's almost always a lose situation when you get into trying to force somebody into a car.
And you know what? The application of force is never pretty.
Absolutely.
So any application of force, justified or not, when you view it on body cam,
looks bad.
It always looks bad. I mean, it's very seldom do you see an application of force that says, that didn't look too bad.
Yeah, that looked pretty good.
Exactly.
No, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way. So, again, you get back to, I know that it's working for us at Gwinnett County, because, again, we get back to last year alone, 254, incidents where we applied force out of over 500,000 calls for service.
You talk about force, and one of the big things that was seen was people standing around watching while people had their, knee on the neck, with like James Floyd. What is the requirement or the policy and procedure with regards to the excessive force or alternatives before shooting? And when you do something, are they actually required to talk about it, to tell, if you see something, say something?
Well, again, as far as the exhausting all alternatives before shooting or using force, the way our policy is you should use the least amount of force necessary to complete that lawful objective. So, you should always be looking at the least amount of force to apply at any one time. As far as the duty to intervene, if someone sees excessive force being applied or used on someone, it has always been a practice of our agency to do that. We've always, in many police policies, you have one section that's the section that's got about 50, 60, or 70 duty regarding this, duty regarding that, duty regarding to have a home telephone, duty regarding, we always had a duty regarding that ability to intervene, but it applies to all situations, not just force situations. If you see someone acting wrong, whether they be committing a crime, whether they be violating policies, if they're not acting as one of our employees should act, there's always that duty of an employee, any employee, to bring that information forward. What we have done in light of what's recently occurring here is we've now restated that in our force policy. Mm-hmm. So in addition to it always being something that we've been expecting our folks to do, and it's been in that section of our policy manual, that duty, it wasn't specific to force, it was relating to anything. But we also have now added it to our force policy that if you see it, you're required to intervene. And if you're not able to intervene, you're going to have to be able to explain why you weren't able to intervene. And beyond intervening, you're also required to immediately report it to a supervisor. So, it's two-step. You're required to intervene, and you must report it. There is no option not to.
Yeah, this idea of, well, he'd been on longer than I have. I assumed he was going to do. I know the training that y'all do, that's no longer, not that it has been, but it's not acceptable. It's not a acceptable position to take, because if you know better and you know it's wrong, whether you've been there for 10 years or 10 days, when you know something's wrong, you know that the officer that has more experience than you also knows it's wrong. So intervening it's not a way of looking, belittling yourself, looking small, trying to belittle the officer that's doing it. It's just trying to make things right.
It's trying to make things right, and it holds everyone that's on the scene accountable, not just that. Again, if your only excuse is I didn't intervene just because that was a more experienced officer, but
Bad.
in your heart you said, but I knew it was wrong, you're
You
correct.
should have, yeah.
That's a bad answer.
Yep.
Again, the policy in and of itself has always been there. It hasn't been specifically in our force policy, but it has been a policy of our department. Again, and I'll say it goes beyond force for us. It's in anything you see. If you see anything that they do that's not right, you need to be bringing that forward.
Yeah, and a lot of people, the training nowadays is understanding, especially for the older officers that have been there for a long time, that this is what's expected.
Yes.
You know, don't think that somebody's quote unquote being the snitch. You've got to understand they're doing their job. You weren't doing yours. And that's the important way that thought process has got to change for these older officers. And I know y'all work overtime getting those older officers schooled in what's the correct way and the correct response. This is what they're going to do, so be prepared for it.
Right. And I think that comes to culture as well, your police culture. And I think that's again where we're ahead of the curve is because it's been part of our police culture for many, many years. So it's not something that we have to train and change behavior because it's been expected behavior for 25, 30 plus years, that this has always been the culture and the thought of our agency. It's always been that way for us.
Well, that's the only way to do it. It's through the training, through experience, and through repeat.
Correct. Absolutely.
Now, officers are required by policy, I know, to exhaust all alternatives before using that gun.
Mm-hmm.
What are the different alternatives and the levels that y'all have with, and I know that it's probably a very simple question because most all police departments have the same progression, but kind of describe what y'all's progression is.
Well, a lot of folks don't realize, but just the officer's presence alone is that first level. Again, that first level is the presence and that ability to try to de-escalate. Again, if the opportunity presents itself, you want to use the least amount of force as necessary before going there. So, what we have is things called soft, empty hands. That's just where you're grabbing hold of someone, trying to control them with maybe an armbar technique or something.
Or even a touch on the shoulder or on the elbow rather than a grab on the elbow.
That's correct. Just grabbing them and just holding them, not wrestling with them or fighting with them, but just using that just to kind of say, hey, I've got you.
This is not going anywhere good if you continue.
Right. I'm giving you a lawful command. I want you to comply. And again, while you're doing this, you're talking, trying to get that voluntary compliance. But, beyond that, then you have, physical force with the application, of your hands, body, and things like that, where they become strikes, hand strikes and things like that. We also have chemical munitions, so we have pepper spray, which many agencies have. We have,
It burns, but it's not fatal.
It's not fatal.
Been there, done that.
We have aspatons. We have tasers.
Been there, done that too.
So we have a lot of different alternatives before you have to get to a deadly force encounter. And I think creating those alternatives reduces your likelihood to have to use deadly force because you have options. You have force options. When you start eliminating force options, you go from 0 to 100 because there's nothing else in between. So
Exactly.
I think having force options, and it's my belief that that's beneficial not only for our officers, but for those folks that we have contact with because we're not limited to what our options are going to be. Now, if someone presents a gun, we're not going to go through that progression right away.
Exactly.
It's but
they've taken that to the end progression.
Correct. But again, we go back to training and we go back to everything we do. And again, I hate to keep harping on the 254 applications of force in 2019, but it shows you that these things work.
Well, the important thing is letting the person that's on the other end that you're dealing with understand that they're the person that's going to determine the level that it goes to. I've had situations where, I've had to deal with people and say, it's obvious they were fixing to want to fight, and it's like, well, we'll do this if that's where you really want to go, but just understand I'm not paid to lose, I'm paid to win. And we'll go to wherever it has to do, but eventually you're going to do what I'm asking you to do. And it's amazing how often people will think about that for a second and do what you do with the. Let's do this the easy way. There's no sense in us doing it the hard way because the end result's going to be the same.
And the reality is, more times than not, many more times than not,
We're able
to get people to comply.
Voluntary compliance is the end result, is the first option, the best option that every officer looks for.
And it's the option that we most often see.
Absolutely. Well, when you have any type of this stuff, does Gwinnett County have a Citizens Advisory Review Board?
They do not. Again, that's just something that you're seeing. It's been citizen review boards and advisory boards have been around for many, many, many years, and mostly you saw them at they started off in the Northeast and they started off in things like that where there was a culture, not labeling any one agency particularly, but there was truly a culture of corruption, and things like that. So those boards came into play to have that oversight. But as we've seen especially over the last year. But over the last several years, there's been that growing, I don't want to use the word demand, but request or, ask of our community
to put something in place.
To have something in place. Not to say that we're doing things wrong, but to further. And, I think we've got a great relationship with our community overall.
I do too.
We're very lucky in Gwinnett County. We've got a great citizenry here overall. And, we've got great support for the police department that we have. But that's not by accident. That's by work. That's by building relationships. That's by building community trust. That's what body cameras does.
Absolutely.
That's what our force reporting requirements does. It creates an environment where things have to be reported. Things have to be reviewed. There's things that are there for the public so that they can have trust in us. And the way I look at a community advisory board, that's just another piece. It's another piece in maintaining that trust that we have with our community. I don't want to say build the trust because I think we already have the trust of our community for the most part.
There's maybe enhancing it.
But it's always about enhancing it. And like we said before, we're always evolving. We're always wanting to do those things. So we are currently, researching the possibility of a citizen advisory board because again, I think that only can benefit. I think it provides more benefit than it does anything else because, again, and you see it at different levels of the county at right now. You've got the Citizen Review Committee for the department's budget. The citizens, have a voice in the budget process so that they understand what's going on. And why not the same for us?
No, absolutely. I've seen through the years in different agencies it come and go.
Correct.
You'll have them, then all of a sudden you won't have them, and then it'll come back, and then it'll go away. And I think it's going to be something that as we move forward, you're going to see more and more, and it's going to be more of a stay in place. But I think you're going to see those evolve a lot to where people right now think, well, we're going to get them in there, and we're going to make sure that everybody does something right, and we're going to, put the accent on what they do wrong. And I don't think that's the purpose of them. And I don't think that in the end that will be the result of them either.
No, and I don't think it will be either. And again, there's so many different models of review boards, advisory boards out there. But what you have to find is what's right for your community, what's needed for your community. And I think that's the balance that we're looking for here is, we want to maintain and further develop the relationship that we have so that we continue to keep the trust of our community. And we think that, by working with our community and being open, not only with what our policies are, what our processes and complaint processes are, but also about involving them as we review and revise those as we evolve.
Well, I've seen through working with the police department here in Gwinnett County through my security company that cooperation has been just right there, and it's always available. And the cooperation has been tremendous between the public and private agencies. It's an awesome thing here in Gwinnett. Now, I know that aside from all this has been great, and I really appreciate all the information that you've been willing to lay out here. I know that you're also involved in a nonprofit that has police-related activities, and it's called Red, Blue, and You. And could you tell us a little bit about that? Just let us know. I'm going to have someone out here later in the month to really talk in depth about it, but tell us about Red, Blue, and You.
Well, I don't remember exactly which year. I don't, but it's only been 4 or 5 years. I don't know exactly when Red, Blue, and You started. But Red, Blue, and You was started by a local businessman here in Gwinnett County, and it's done for the purpose of doing nothing more than recognizing first responders in Gwinnett County for what they do. It's not about giving awards. It's not about recognizing the best officer of the year. What it's about is just saying thank you. It's a way for the community, especially the business community as well, to come together each year and just say thank you for your commitment to public service, and we just want to recognize you for that.
I think it's awesome. It's a matter of getting together and breaking bread a little bit. And, I would like to point out that is absolutely completely funded by donations.
It is.
And people can become sponsors of it. We're sponsoring it again this year as well. And I would like to recommend that anybody that would be interested in maybe helping out, making a small donation, to look it up at www.redblueu.org. That's www.redblueu.org. And go in there and see if you can help out a little bit. And it's really an awesome thing.
Yeah, and they do it at the same time every year. They do it around Thanksgiving. So It's going to be mid-November when they'll be doing it again this year. So this is a perfect time if you just want to be involved, whether you want to sponsor or whether you just want to attend, because it's open to the public. It's open to the public just to come in and say thanks.
And I can tell you right now, as part of, and I promote this all the time, that security officers have become basically first responders since 9/11, because we're the first ones there on the scene. And I can tell you from our industry, we all appreciate the support from everyone, and we look forward to being there again this year.
Well, and we thank you for that support. I know Red, Blue, and You does. So, again, thank you.
Well, Chief, I appreciate it very much. You've given a lot of information. I could talk with you probably another hour about Gwinnett County and about our wonderful county police department. But I guess I ought to wrap it up. Thank you again. And thank you all for joining us on Case in Point, presented by Paradigm Security Services. Remember, you can join us live every Wednesday at 11:30 in the morning, or you can listen to our show anytime you want by going to businessradiox.com, clicking on the Gwinnett Studio, and then click on Case in Point. Be sure and hit that subscribe button and let us know you're there. It helps us out as well. Join us next week at 11:30 when we'll talk with another business leader about their business and related security issues in today's world. Thanks again to my guest, Chief Brett West with Gwinnett County Police Department. And for my producer, Mike, I'm Rick Strawn. And remember, at Paradigm Security Services, we cover more than just your assets.